All right. So today we'll be talking about the introduction and literature review. And you all are a bit in luck because I typically start this class with a pop quiz. And this is one set of questions that I used to ask students, but because we are all virtual and I used to have students turn it in on paper, I have a link that I'm going to post in the chat that has a quiz. And I want you all to take the next 5 minutes to take this quiz and just report back to me. This is just a way of checking whether, you're familiar or understand all of some of those things related to plagiarism. So that was the topic of last week. So take about 5 minutes and take this quiz, and then we'll report back and perhaps together answer these questions. How does that sound? So unfortunately, it won't be like a graded quiz, but at least it'll help us to clarify whatever questions or things that aren't clear as it relates to plagiarism. So I'm going to pause the recording and the sharing, and then we'll come back. The time is 1:49, so at 1:55. Answering. Okay, so we can get volunteers. If you want to, you can just unmute your mic and let us know. So for question number 1, is it plagiarism if you copy and paste a paragraph of text from a website without enclosing it in quotes or referencing the source? Is it or is it not?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is indeed. Thank you. Is it plagiarism if, yes?
Senimata said her power went off.
Oh, okay, Sally. Well, she can join whenever her power is back on. And this is being recorded, so she'll be able to see it.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so for the second one, is it plagiarism if you use the ideas of another author without providing a reference, even if you write them in your own words?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so yes, that's true. And why is it plagiarism?
You're not giving credit to the author for their ideas.
Exactly. Number 3, is it plagiarism if you claim work produced by another student as your own?
Yes. Yes.
Yes. And
Yeah.
the example, even in the quiz that you took, had an example of 2 people that work together, and that can be a form of plagiarism if there is a lot of similarity. So even if you work with someone, sometimes it can come up as plagiarism. What about number 4? If you copy a diagram or a data table from a website, you provide a source underneath. Is that plagiarism or not?
No.
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 And why is it not plagiarism?
You gave a reference.
Because we provide a reference for the source.
Exactly. So you provided a reference for that source. What about if you submit all or part of one essay for 2 separate assignments? So that means you are.
Yes, it's self-plagiarism.
It can be
Yes.
a form of self-plagiarism because academic honesty entails that you produce original work for original assignments. So you want to make sure that you are not double crossing or using work from one class in another. What about if you copy words from a book into your own work, but place quote marks around them and provide a citation? Is this plagiarism or not?
No.
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 It's not. So even if you're copying exact words, when you're providing the quotation marks around them, this is to inform the reader that those are the exact words. And so when you provide a citation, it is not plagiarism. Number 7, including a fact or saying in your assignment, which is generally known without providing a reference.
No.
No.
No. So if it's a common knowledge, then it doesn't need to be referenced. And lastly, number 8, incorporating text from another source, changing 1 or 2 words and providing a citation.
No.
It's not plagiarism.
No.
No, it's not.
Is it? Is it not?
It's
I
not
think-
because you're providing a citation still. So you're still referencing the author, maybe like paraphrasing, but not plagiarism.
Okay, so yes, so in the sense that you are providing a reference for it, in that sense, you are still giving credit where it is due. So perhaps this is more of a paraphrasing error. And you want to make sure that when you are including other sources of information into your text, that you are one, either paraphrasing correctly, or two, including longer chunks of text appropriately into your papers. And so there's a way to go about including a larger chunk of text in your own papers and how to present that according to the different formatting styles. But if you just copy and paste something and then try to act like you're paraphrasing and don't provide appropriate and you try to act like it's paraphrasing, one or two does not make it count as appropriate. Excuse me, I here. Mm, mm, Okay, I'm sorry, I have a call coming in. I'll be right.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, I don't know how that happens. Okay, so I'm back and okay, it's still recording. Sorry, have you guys ever gotten a Zoom call? I don't know, I didn't know that was possible.
Yes, it happens. Sometimes it's my mom that's calling me through like normal phone, but it says Zoom call. It's really weird. It's some update.
Okay, and it has a ringtone and everything. I'm like so confused. Okay, so let me just continue. So this is where we left off. So I got distracted. I apologize. Yes, so you want to make sure that you are paraphrasing appropriately. And by that, you cannot just copy a text and just change a few words around. This is a form of like not paraphrasing appropriately. So you want to make sure that you're very mindful of writing things in your own words when you are paraphrasing text or using the exact original text and making sure that you are enclosing it in quotation marks when you are including it. All right. So if you have other questions about plagiarism, I'll be happy to answer some of those. And their College Board also has a plagiarism policy that you can consult if you need to as well. So moving into the meat of the class, let's take a look at the different sections of the AP research paper. So you have the introduction, the method, process, or approach section, the results, product, or findings section. So that's section 3. Section 4 is your discussion, analysis, and our evaluation section. Section 5 is your direction and your conclusion and future direction section, and section 6 is your bibliography. So let's take the next few minutes to talk about what goes into each of these sections. So we will do a Jamboard. So I will send you all the link for a Jamboard in just a second here, and we will use that as a means to write down the different ideas on what should be included in each section. Okay. Oh, where's this Jamboard link? So perhaps you can think about what should be included in the introduction, what should be included in your okay, and share. Okay, so you should be in the chat box receiving the link to the Jamboard. And I want in the Jamboard for you all to brainstorm on what should be included in the different sections of the AP research paper. So perhaps I will add some subtitles here. So in the introduction, and you can use some sticky notes to write what should be there. And we'll have section 2 here be the methods. I'm not going to use the full titles so that it's shorter. In the past, we've done this on the board. So today it's virtual in your results, in your analysis. So this is section 4. In your vision. And lastly, in your, okay, so I want you all to jot down perhaps what are the things that you think should be included in each of these different sections of the AP research paper. So you can use sticky notes or just write in different colors, up to you, of what should be included. So when you're thinking of the introduction, what are you going to be writing in that section of the paper?
Miss Fergie, can you please move my sticky note to introduction?
This one?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so I have here an introduction and a literature review. Awesome. Feel free to add things. And you can make your sticky notes smaller, or if you need to put more in. Let's see, what time is it now? Let's take about 5 minutes. So at about 2:15, at about 2:15, we'll kind of debrief. So, oh yeah, sorry, I kind of switched a bit. Okay, so I see some cool things. In your methods, you've included that it's how you're conducting your research. Yes. Such as the methodology or experiments that are used. The actual research method, yes. Does anyone need help moving some things? Okay, cool. You guys have it. Awesome. So a thesis statement, is that being pushed towards the introduction? Cool. Let's see. Can I make this smaller? How it appears on the screen. Okay. Maybe we can make some of these sticky notes a little smaller so that they can all. So yes, your research question does go in the introduction. I'm just gonna help arrange this. So bibliography does have your sources. Conclusion has information gained from the research, summarizing the main points. Your results section here has personal interpretation of data versus write about your findings. So here, when you do your personal interpretation, this is more of an analysis. So is it okay if I move this into the analysis section? Well, I'm doing it anyways. Okay. So write about your findings. I think this can be a bit of both, and sections 3 and 4 are oftentimes written together. So some students choose to write them separately, so they'll have a clearly, a section written out for section 3 where they only present their results, and then at the section 4, that's where they'll discuss them. And then some students choose to present the results and discuss at the same time. So it depends on your style and preference as a writer, writing your paper, but both approaches are accepted. So yes, here graphs of the statistics you found when conducting your research should be part of your results. Okay, you guys, I think this is all, it sums it up pretty well. So just a few things that need to be added to the board. So the methods section should include, I think everything you've written in your introduction is good. So your research topic, your research question, of course, the important topics around what you're looking at, your literature review, definitely the gap in your research, and by extension, your gap and fill statements, the purpose of your research, and known information in and around your topic. So this is all check. Your method section for section 2 of your paper should definitely include how you intend to conduct your research or how you will be conducting your research. It should elaborate on the method you are choosing and the process that you are choosing. What you should also do is justify your choices. So I'm going to add here. So you'll have to justify your choices of research method and process. And by that, it means that you will not only have to explain why the method you're choosing is most appropriate, but perhaps even hint towards why another method, why another method is not more appropriate for your research. So that's just an added element that you didn't include from your brainstorming. In the results section, it is literally the results or the findings from your research. If you have any statistics, whether they're data tables or graphs that are presented, this is what you include in your results. And your analysis is your interpretation of the data. So you have elements of comparing and contrasting, perhaps across different variables. So when you are, for example, doing a survey and you want to present the results according to different genders or different age groups or different categories that you've identified, then you are doing some comparison, like, oh, among the 12th graders, 5 12th grade students that are women expressed their agreement that natural hair is the best way to wear their hair, versus 6 women who, 6 12th grade students who are girls expressed that it doesn't matter if you have natural hair or hair that is not natural. So, you know, there are ways that you can go about that. And then your conclusion section will definitely include a summary of the main points and the main information that's gained from your research, but also a hint towards future directions. That means where should the research go? Where should the research go next? So this could be an area that you would like to investigate in the future, and it could also be an area that you point other researchers towards in the future. So even if it's not you doing that research, someone else interested in this field can do research on that because you've identified more gaps as it exists. So research that, for example, wasn't done on the entire country, but wants to be pretty generalizable, that's something that students hint towards in the future. And your bibliography is the sources that you have used or consulted during research process, and you want to make sure that these are cited according to a citation format and style. So I'll just add that in there: APA, MLA, or Chicago Manual Style, among others. So you'll just want to make sure you respect one of these styles. Awesome. So, yes, let's add this in analysis: description of strong and weak points. Whoever added that, thank you. That is a great addition to the analysis section. All right, so are there questions, comments you want to share on what this all looks like once you see it visually on a board? What are your thoughts? You can feel free to unmute yourself. Does it make the process seem more tangible, like it's easier for you to understand now that you see it written? Are there areas that you're unclear about that you see on the board?
I'm still not, I don't understand really analysis yet.
Okay, so if I can explain a little bit more about the analysis is where you as a researcher are able to share your voice. This is where your perspective, so Jabu, you as a researcher on this project, you'll be responsible for collecting data. And then once you have that data, you're gonna look at the data and you're gonna start to see connections, you're gonna start to see trends, you're gonna get results from that data, and then your interpretation of it. So literally sometimes it's a statement like, this is more than that, and I believe so because of X, Y, and Z reasons. So it allows you to have like a conversation with the reader. So you're describing what you're seeing from the results, you're comparing, you're contrasting, you're interpreting, you're perhaps even sometimes bringing in more context that the results don't show. And it looks a little different for everyone because the analysis is really where the researchers own, like your own essence really comes out in your research through your analysis. So someone else could have collected those same results, but the way you analyze it and the connections that you see and the conclusions that you're able to draw from it have a lot to do with who you are as a person and as a researcher. So the analysis section will always look a little bit different for everyone. Dabu, does that explain it a little bit more?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Any other people who might need clarification on what's to be included in every section? I love the way this visually represents itself, and you can always come back to it and be like, what am I supposed to include in each section? Yeah. Okay, well, if there are no comments, then we'll go back to our slides. Okay, so
I have one quick question.
Oh, yes.
So about how many sources do you think we should have for this project?
Thank you. So in terms of sources that you include in your paper, which are cited in your bibliography or referenced in your bibliography, when I was doing the AP research training, I was informed that any AP research paper should have no less than 5 academic papers or journal articles. Those that tend to be peer reviewed or come from journals, you should have no less than 5. If you have other sources that are non-academic, there is no minimum for those. So I say in total, you should have no less than 5 academic sources. I think most students, there's no like average number, but I assume about 10 sources. You might consult some that are not academic in nature. Some people might have, I asked for no less than 7, and that's literally why it's the minimum that I'm requiring for your annotated bibliography. But some can go to have as up to 30 or even more. So depending on your research topic and how much literature you have access to will also determine what's the number. But if you want a minimum number, I'm gonna say a total of 7 as a minimum. 5 for academics. And obviously, the more academic papers you include in your own research paper, then perhaps the better it could be. So yeah, does that help you answer your question? There's no direct, like, you need 7. It depends.
Yes, that helps. Thank you.
Okay, and hopefully this question helps clarify that concern for everyone else. And I talked during the one-on-ones to a few of you about this. All right, so moving gears. If writing is a linear process, so this is going to be my assumption. If writing is a linear process, then let us begin with first things first. All right, so hello, Sally. Thank you for joining us again. And we're talking about the writing process for your AP research paper. So if writing is a linear process, beginning with first things first, in order to write the introduction, this is going to be a 3-step process. So your introduction really starts with the annotated bibliography. And from the annotated bibliography, you will be able to compile your literature review, which is you literally reviewing the sources that you've consulted, and explaining and comparing and contrasting them, perhaps finding what are the ways that the different authors agree or disagree on certain things, and allows you to really make a point for the gap that you've identified in the literature base. And all of these help you to write section 1, which is the introduction. So the literature review is part of the introduction in the AP research paper. And in other research papers, sometimes these are 2 separate sections. So your introduction still has an element of presenting the context and background information about your topic in general. And then your literature review is where you dig into the sources that you have consulted for the purpose of your research. Does this make sense to you all, or do you need me to clarify or explain this linear process? And there's nothing linear about writing, but at least the process is step 1, step 2, and step 3.
Yes.
Okay, what is your question?
It's not clear in my head, literature review. So I have to review what was in the bibliography.
Yes. So your bibliography is going to be an account of the sources that you have read and consulted and even included in your paper. This is why it's typically written at the end. So if anyone who's reading your paper is interested in one of the sources you've mentioned, then they can go at the end of your paper, which is your bibliography, to be able
Yes.
to find that same one. But most of the sources that are included in any paper or in any research paper for AP research, it's in the introduction. And your introduction includes one part, which is your background and context, and the other part, which is the literature review. Those are the two key aspects of the introduction and literature review, which is section 1. Now, the annotated bibliography assignment that I'm asking you all to submit by Sunday is going to help you to identify the sources that you want to include in your literature review. That's why I'm asking you to read them, to summarize them in short, and explain how you plan to use it in your paper. Because when you're
Okay.
writing the literature review, this is where you will actually be including it in your paper. So you might
Okay.
read 1 paper, 2 papers, 3 papers, and then you want to explain what those papers are and perhaps explain if there are any points in common, are there commonalities, are there areas in which the authors disagree? So one author said something that's completely different from the other author, or are there areas in which they are in the same alignment? So they're saying the same thing. And why we do this in academic papers is because research is part of an ever ongoing conversation. And there is a little analogy that I like to use here. So we're right on target. So I want you to look at this image, and you can close your eyes if you want to, or just look at the image. I have a short description that I will use. So if you want to close your eyes, that's totally fine. Um, but it is, oh, sorry, let me just find it. All right, so it's a metaphor. So I've chosen this image to represent Burke's unending conversation metaphor. Imagine that you enter a parlor. You come late. When you arrive, others have long preceded you, and they are engaged in a heated discussion. A discussion too heated for them to pause and tell you exactly what it's about. In fact, the discussion had already begun long before any of them got there. So then no one present is qualified to retrace for you all the steps that had gone before. You listen for a while until you decide that you have caught the tenor of the argument. Then you put in your oar. Someone answers, you answer him, another comes to your defense, another aligns himself against you, to either the embarrassment or gratification of your opponent, depending upon the quality of your ally's assistance. However, the discussion is interminable. The hour grows late, you must depart. And you do depart with the discussion still vigorously in progress. So if you have your eyes closed or you're still looking at the image, this is Burke's metaphor for unending conversations, which is often used to explain what the literature review is all about. So it's this idea that in academic papers, you are addressing these unending conversations. So there are people who have written about work similar to yours, way before you came to the conversation. And before leaving the conversation, you add in what you have to say about it through your own research paper. And, in the future, other people will also write about that same topic and perhaps use what you've written as they're building up their own arguments. Does that metaphor help to explain perhaps what this idea of a literature review is? Maybe yes?
Yes.
Maybe no? Yes. Okay, so literature review, think of it as an unending conversation. So you're interacting with these different authors who are writing papers, and maybe you agree, maybe you disagree, maybe there are things that they say together, maybe are things that they say that are unique according to their contexts. And all of that, again, helps you to build an argument for the gap that you are addressing in the literature base. And it's all rooted in the literature section of your introduction. Awesome. So you can go back to this metaphor and return to it if you need inspiration on how to go about it, or the image that I presented above, which hopefully helps to illustrate that. So taking a few seconds. Ooh, sorry. So think of research and the literature review in particular as an unending conversation. I think that's what I mentioned. So your literature review, to define it for you, actually, would any of you like to read this section? Volunteers.
Can I?
Yes.
A literature review is an overview of research on a given topic and answers to related research questions. Literature reviews are an important part of research and should be treated as such. A well-written literature review organizes literature, evaluates literature, identifies patterns and trends in literature, synthesizes literature.
Thank you, Binta. So the literature review section does 4 key things. One, it's organizing the sources that you have consulted. It's evaluating them. And by evaluating them, you are assessing a judgment, right? So you are stating whether you're agreeing or whether you're not agreeing, whether what they did is original or if it really just goes in line with certain trends. You're identifying patterns and trends in the literature, literally. So where is it that perhaps some of these sources are really in agreement, or are there things that you're seeing repeatedly, or maybe there's a lot of information that's missing repeatedly in those sources that you have consulted, and synthesizing this, so writing about it and bringing in your own voice. So in your literature review, you're not just reporting on these sources, you're also interpreting them, so you're bringing in your own voice, and that helps to build the argument for the gap that you are addressing in your literature base. All right, so I'm going to quickly go over some of the key things as far as literature reviews are concerned. And if you have questions or you need a clarification, please unmute your mics and just let me know so that I can go over it. So just to make sure we're staying on task, the literature review may consist of simply a summary of key sources, but in the social sciences, a literature review typically has some type of pattern that it follows that combines both a summary and synthesis within some type of conceptual categories. At your level, it doesn't have to be super strict, but you want to make sure that you're doing a couple of these different things. So you want to make sure that you're giving a new interpretation of some of the old materials, that you are tracing some of the intellectual progression in the field. So if you are looking at psychology as your field, then maybe you want to look at more psychology papers. Depending on the situation, you want to make sure you're evaluating sources and advising, whoever is going to be reading your paper on the more pertinent and relevant research. Or you can, in the conclusion of your literature review, identify where the gaps exist and where a problem has been researched to date. So these are the key elements of a literature review, and you want to make sure that you're hitting on all of them or as much as you can. So the purpose of a literature review is to place each work in the context of its contribution in understanding the problem that is studied. You want to make sure that you're describing the work of each in relation to others. So perhaps what the author said in one paper versus what an author said in another paper. So you're putting them in conversation with one another, not just stating source A, this is what it was about, this is what I take away from it, or this is what it said, source B, source C, source D. So you want to make sure that you are putting them in conversation with one another. You want to make sure that you are identifying new ways to interpret perhaps prior research. So if you have, a new understanding on what they have written, definitely reveal this in your paper and reveal any gaps that might exist. So what's missing from this literature? What is it that they haven't done, or what are some of the questions that they haven't asked? So you want to be critical in your literature review section. You also want to resolve conflicts that might seem contradictory. And again, this is overall what a literature review does. Your literature review can touch up on as many as you can, but it doesn't have to be 100% perfect to this list. These are all guidelines. Identify areas of prior scholarship to prevent duplication of effort. So if your research question has literally been answered before, then your literature review section should be able to determine this and point the way in fulfilling a need for additional research. So this is where you have your fill statement and locate your own research within the context of existing literature. And this is where you point towards the gap. So hopefully the gaps and fill statements that we were, looking into earlier in the year make a little bit more sense here in the literature review. So literature reviews include a process, and this visual helps to explain it a little bit. So you want to make sure you've identified your research question or your literature review question, that you review discipline styles so you understand how to report your own, that you actually do a search of the literature. So your annotated bibliography is going to make sure you do that. And then you're managing your references, and then you're critically analyzing and evaluating them. So as you read them, maybe you'll have notes, write them down on your paper or your computer. What is it that you agree? What is it that stood out to you in particular? And then you're synthesizing it. So you're writing up together and you're bringing in your voice, your thoughts, your opinions around it. And step 7, which is where you're actually compiling that review. So does this graph make a little bit more sense towards the different steps that you will be taking for this section of your paper?
Yes.
Okay. And again, there's no one specific formula for addressing how to do the literature review. Everybody's literature review looks a little bit different, especially because everybody has a different topic. Some topics have a lot of existing literature on it, and some topics do not have a lot of literature or sources on that topic. So it will look a little bit different for everyone. Here is an example of a well-written, simple literature review that I want to share with you. So let's click on this link and you'll get a chance to see the process that this student used in order to move from the annotated bibliography to the literature review. So here you see the annotated bibliography form of the paper. So there are a couple of sources, and the students does a short summary and talks about how they intend to use it. So this is 1, 2, 3 sources that they have consulted. So there are in italicized are the steps that the student used to come about writing their short literature review. So here it states that, she found 3 likely sources, and when she read them, she wrote a description of each, much like what you'll be doing in your annotated bibliography. Next, she decided upon the order of the paragraphs in the paper. This is where you're organizing the sources in your literature review. So she decided on how she was going to weave that into her literature review. And then she carefully chose the order of the paragraph so she could talk about, one, that people respond to the mentally ill, two, that they contact reduces both rejections. So this is a bit more focused to her paper, which we won't be like diving into, but I've shared this in the resources section of the Google Classroom, and I really strongly encourage you to look over this example so that it can help you as you're writing your own. I believe sometimes the best way to learn is to see what others have done and use it as a model. I think this was executed quite well. So she then looks at her literature, her annotated bibliography, and adds in elements of transitions and hooks and some interpretation. And in the final stage here, she writes an introductory and concluding paragraphs. So a literature review is almost like writing a paper within your actual research paper. So you need to have an introduction for your literature review, and you should have a conclusion for your literature review. So if you want to look at an example of how the paper looked, let's see, we should be able to click this. Oh, okay, that didn't work, but I should be able to find what the example of that full literature review looked like. I had another link for that as well. So does that help to show you what that steps looks like as far as the transition from the annotated bibliography to your literature review?
Yes.
Yes. So that first step is identifying sources. Then you have the step where you are writing up an annotated bibliography. So you're summarizing and describing what's written in each of those sources you've consulted. And then your literature review is where you put them in conversation with one another. Awesome. So before leaving the unending conversation, be sure you've identified a gap in the academic literature and how your research intends to fill this gap. So this is again going back to what we have been learning about earlier in the class. So this concludes our lecture for today. These are the sources. You can always consult the sources at the end of the slides if you want to get more information or clarification about something that was included. So let me stop sharing here and stop recording.
Miss Riggy, I had a question.
Oh, yes.
For our paper, when we cite, do we get to choose which cite method we want to use?
Yes.
Or it has to be MLA?
No, you get to choose if you want to use MLA, APA, or any other style. Most students end up doing one or the other, so either MLA or APA, unless they're already familiar with like Chicago manual style. I personally use APA style because that's what's mostly used in the social sciences and even in some sciences, like when I was doing environmental science in undergrad, we used APA. So I'm more familiar and comfortable with APA rather than MLA, but I've had to use MLA in the past before, and I've taught you guys how to use MLA. So it's your preference. You can choose MLA even if you're working on a social science topic. What's most important with AP research is that you're consistent with one style. So don't start using MLA and then use APA. You want to do one and be consistent in that one. Other questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Lena?
About how long on average is the entire introduction, like in most people's papers?
Okay, so actually this is something that we used to write on the board as well when we did the brainstorming on what should be included in each section. So your whole paper is roughly about 20 pages. I think the introduction ends up being about 4 to 6 pages, depending on the student's depending on the student's paper, like, what the topic is. So about 4 to 6 pages, or about, let's say, 2,000 words. Since the whole paper is about 4,000 to 5,000 words, about 2,000 words is your introduction. And then your method section can be a page or two. It really depends. Your results, if you are combining both your results and your analysis, then it gets a bit longer. So your results page, if you're separating them, maybe that's going to be about 2 to 4 pages, depending on how much you're showing. If you have a lot of graphs, then it might take a lot more space. But some results are literally only presented in terms of graphs, so there are no words there. And then your analysis is where you'll be doing a lot more of that interpretation. But if you're doing qualitative research, then some of your results might be quotes, and all of those do count towards your words. So in general, sections 3 and 4 can roughly be about, let's say, 5 to 7 pages. Together. So then that we have about 4 to 6 plus about 1 to 2 plus about 5 to 7. What's the math on that? I'm not exactly sure. And then your conclusion can be, again, about 1 to 2 pages. And then your bibliography is also roughly about 1 to 2 pages. So if you're able to do a math on that, you'll get an idea. In terms of words, your introduction can be roughly about 2,000 words, plus or minus, depending on what you're writing about. Your section 2 can literally be about 500 to about 800 words. I haven't seen too many that are too long. Your results and analysis sections, those can be about another 1,000 or 2,000 words, depending on how deeply you are interpreting the results. And your conclusion, again, roughly about 800, like 600 to 800 words. So those are the rough estimates. And you have examples of previously written research papers. You don't have to go ahead and count every word, but if you're looking at it, there's a highlight tool that you can capture to see how many words were included in some of the previous samples. But hopefully that gives you an idea of how you're organizing it in terms of the AP research paper. Does that make more sense to you, Lena?
Yes, thank you. I have one question, another question.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
The whole thing, is it double spaced or did you single space it?
Oh no, it's all double spaced. So 20 pages double spaced, or 4,000 to 5,000 words double spaced. So when I'm saying 2 pages here, 5 pages here, it's all double spaced. Any other questions? All right, so if there are no questions, then we will end class